Alright. Continuing on, it's part 3, and I think I have my answer. Why? Because things weren't adding up. But now things do add up. Okay, so apparently at one point there was someone named James Allen that went about collecting lynching photos, and they were described as rare. Okay, and there's postcards described in this article here. This is from 2003. I'm glad I didn't have to search the internet for things like that to find out whether there was more than a certain number to figure out whether. So it's a coincidence it was likely to happen. Yes, they happen to be your teaching materials, but if what do you? There's only a small number of these things out there that people could look at, which is great. I don't like to see shit. I don't like to see Holocaust. None of that. But lest we forget, I suppose. Anyway, I don't want to get into the ethics of it. In general, basically, I think my head will probably explode. Just so you don't want that. You wish that shit never happened. So it's like fuck. Okay. Anyway, so there's only a small number of these things. So wherever this guy got it is inevitably, I would think. And if I'm wrong on this, then this is it. This is the evidence. I mean, if I'm wrong on this, if there's a lot of these things out there, and they just happen to be every single picture that she had on her passouts to be exactly the same, and there were no, there's numerous others out there that could have been printed and arranged on some page to send in, but they just all coincidentally happen to be the same as hers, then yes, it is her materials. It is unique to her, and that raises this. You have too many unlikely things happening for anybody to believe that she didn't have a hand in sending the letters. And I just fucking A, man. I mean, why does it have to be that? I believe this article is saying that they're rare, and I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna believe that they're rare, and they're so. If this individual decided that it would be a good idea to put those disgusting kinds of pictures inside of a hate letter sent to someone that is associated with NAACP, inevitably the person would pick the same pictures that she used in her materials. And so it's just a fucking coincidence. Fortunately, I'm not an expert on these things. Dolezal might know a little more about this, and if that's the case, then she should have spoke up and said, well, I mean, that's a part of this whole fucking thing, but that is major. To say that, not only does the evidence point to Oakland as the origin of the hate mail, but now we have the reader and the investigators believing that there are unique materials that aren't as generic as lynching photos, but instead, as anybody would imagine, the instructor would have literature with words in it, uniquely written by her that at least would have had to been photocopied from her materials that she passed out and given to people. And therefore, them being in Oakland you need an explanation for how they got there, and the only way you can explain that they got there was that someone was in Spokane to bring them there, and then that being the case, there are just too many fucking coincidences. That some random person just happened to live in Oakland that just happened to be the kind of person to send letters. However, if there's only a rare small number of these things out there, we don't have to explain why random person in Oakland that she doesn't know would be sending her teaching materials back to her as if it were a mystery. It's not a mystery if you... Okay, so I'm going to assume that is not another coincidence. I'm going to assume that someone putting together a how do we say that? Cynically said care packet would include lynching photos, and if there's only a few of them out there, then they're going to be the fucking same ones that she uses anyway. So there's no mystery there. Okay. So now I can go back to what I was talking about before, and I am absolutely convinced this is the case. That even though it is post office policy to, if a postal worker looks at a letter and has enough time to examine it carefully and sees that it does not have stamps that are canceled upon it, that they are going to put it into the gray box that he describes in this narrative here that I'll do again, and it'll go back for processing. But if there's a big ass stack of letters and the postal worker is flipping through it from the bottom to find the address to save time, because there's no way in the amount of time they have to actually carefully examine the entire front surface of the letter, in the time they have, the letters that they have to handle, there's a lot of letters that are processed. I don't know how much at this particular station, but I would imagine they have a pretty heavy load. And I've received letters that have not had their stamps canceled before. A lot of people have. So let's just, just get some random thing out here to prove that has happened before to other people. This is from, Salon or Snopes.com, and they're talking about what, this is back 2006. This is just a random conversation. Is it legal to reuse stamps that haven't been canceled? And they're talking about it, and they're debating about it. Basically, the answer is the post office has taken the time to put this on their webpage, and they basically say that it is a federal crime to use... God, you can't even see that. To reuse postage. I'll read it. Remove, attempt to remove, or assist to remove cancellation marks from postage. It's a federal crime to do that, or to reuse a stamp, whether canceled or not. They wouldn't have this law if it never happened. In other words, it could have happened at the Rosewood Post Office, despite what is said here in this dialogue. It could have happened. One coincidence I can explain, not two. I cannot explain two coincidences. I can't explain that if the photos, the materials that she passed out or reused at various times that include postcard photographs of lynchings, if there's only a handful of these that exist, then if someone takes the time to put together this particular type of collection, they're going to end up being the same pictures, because there aren't many of them. There's only one coincidence to explain. That's reasonable. It's not reasonable to have two. This I don't buy. I don't buy this conclusion here, basically. I asked Doug if anybody at the post office would ever highlight the letter. They said they do not do this. Then he needs to get in touch with the postal inspector. Let's say the same thing. In fact, the postal inspector says the same thing. No fingerprints on the outside of the letter. That's strange. This is an incident with her son, and I guess I'm getting a little bit tired. So, this was not included with the materials that were distributed by the TV station, but was included with the materials that were distributed by the New York Times. And in this case, what happened is Rachel Dolezal's son called. Told her that they were walking. He and his friend were walking somewhere, or maybe his brother, right? Who knows? And they heard, but they didn't see people that were calling them bad names. I'm not going to repeat it. The N-word. And where is it? And then they say they got scared. They ran to Albertsons and walked over some wine bottles. Well, the police officer took the time to actually watch the video. And he saw that the kids were playing basketball in the Albertsons. They just walked in there on their own. They knocked over some of the wine bottles. And they were just calmly playing. They weren't scared. They didn't run in as they had said. The son admitted that he had lied about being called the N-word, and that basically he had come up with that story to excuse the unexplained breakage of wine bottles that were in the Albertsons while they were there. They didn't want to let whoever they told that they were playing basketball. They just said, the wine bottles knocked over by accident. There's another incident. This son had called her and said that he heard noises in the house, and they kept patrolling, and nothing really came of it. Her son is saying this stuff a lot now, and that really throws a big wrench into this whole thing. And it could be that she's trying to protect her son, and she was probably doing all this for her stepson. Now he talks with the postal inspector, and he pretty much says the same thing. No one's going to put a letter if they know about it, into the post office box, if they can see plainly and clearly in front of them that the letter in front of them has no cancellation on it. Anyway, second, we have no idea how old her son is. We don't. And I'm going to stop there with that thought process. In some cases, and he says here, well, I've seen it without the date stamp, but I haven't seen any of them without the barcode on the bottom. And you know what? I don't know enough about these machines to make that kind of determination. This guy knows more than I do. Basically, I'm going to say that I don't think it's impossible that a letter could have, in a big pile of letters, could have missed going through the machine. And when the pile of letters arrived to the local station, that they flipped through them and they put them in her box. That could have happened. Why? Because we can't place any. Who can we place in Oakland? Except for maybe her her spiritual father, as she says. And they interviewed different people that worked at the post office. 3 women. They asked them whether do you ever put the letters in the P.O. box if it doesn't have a stamp on it? Blah blah blah. What do you do? This whole procedure. They repeated it. So basically, the only room that's left is that the letter would have had to have not gone noticed, and it would have had to have been a very rare case. But I'm convinced that it happened. And it's a matter of her saying that her materials were in there. And her mind was playing tricks on her. When you're scared, you think someone's doing something to you. Your mind plays tricks on you, and you look into things, and those are the same materials. Well, yeah, those are the only ones that exist. Okay. Now, this is a letter that was sent out. This was on the 4th of March. And this is 3 pages of basically pretty much close to right wing as you get. This writing does not look like War Pigs. This was not sent to her, but it was sent to the mayor's office. We don't know if she was given a copy of this. But basically, we have some choice words that are used here. The N-word is used a lot. Okay. Then on the 6th of May, this is before the story broke. The story did not break until a week ago, June 12th, as far as I know. So we have the letter from 9th hole golfer Sergeant X, all these things. They're basically here, and the date stamps. There's Oakland. Apologies and different articles that were responses to. This is the DNA sample, and they basically said, well, there's a male. It was not male as in postal mail, but a male human DNA was found on the letter, unidentified. Additional letter was sent to the Spokesman Review 4 days ago. And this, 4 days ago, I don't believe this was released. It sure as shit looks the same. The writing looks the same. Oakland, once again. These are different parts of items that were, this is just forensic logs and things like that. Alright, so I went into way too much detail to start with. This I probably should have researched before I even tried any of this stuff, but in general, this is the evidence. The evidence is that Dolezal got more than one letter. She got at least 2, maybe 3. The first one was sent just after she had left Oakland, where she was on a trip as part of her duties as part of the Police Ombudsman's Committee. At that point, she went home. About a week later, she found a letter in the post office box, which happened to not have a date stamp or barcode attached to it. The post office says that would never happen. But of course, they assume that what I don't think was addressed in that interview is when you got a big ass pile of letters this fucking high, each one is only about that big, and they're big stack way the fuck up here, and you're flipping through letters, and you have thousands of these to go through in a couple hours, and you got to put all these letters and things in P.O. boxes. You might not look and pick up every single letter and look at them like this. Is there a thing? Is there a barcode? Okay. set it down. Sometimes they're going to just flip through them at the bottom, I would imagine. I've never worked at the post office, but that seems reasonable to me, especially if you're running out of time or there's a heavy load or whatever. Okay? So it could have happened. That's my opinion. Okay? Obviously you can take the word of the Postal Service over mine, but we do know there is evidence that there have been times when letters have arrived to people that don't have the cancellation, and there probably have been letters that have arrived at the time that don't have the barcode on the bottom. Okay, and the barcode's harder to notice that it's missing anyway. So I think it could have happened. Okay? So I think it was authentic, and especially because there were additional letters that were sent a couple months later. And the postmark was out of Oakland. So what makes me think it happened is when she went to Oakland, she pissed somebody off by something that she said or did over at this meeting in the 2 days that she was there, and someone decided to send her a cynically said care packet. Okay? And that care packet happened to include the same collection of rare lynching photographs that she would pass out to other people. And one would think if someone's going to send hate mail to someone that is working for the NAACP or is an advocate for African American rights, that someone that's sick enough to do that is probably sick enough to think they ought to include some lynching pictures. And if there's only a select few of those fucking things out there, then chances are that the same pictures that she's been passing out during her presentations are the pictures that this random individual from Oakland had put in there. And so therefore the only coincidence we have to explain really, which has been explained just by the fact that letters do get stacked and cancellations aren't always caught, we've explained how and why hate mail was sent from Oakland up to Spokane. Okay? Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know what she would have said that would have pissed somebody off. But I assume she did. She could have been picked at random, but I doubt it. There probably were a lot of people there. I would guess. I don't think there'd be the only two people there. And so that being the case, she caught someone's attention. And after having caught that person's attention, they got pissed off. Okay? So they sent this over to her. Now I'm going to go into the article soon, but I also just found something, apparently, and I will say, I'm just going to say this flat out, so you get an idea as to really why I'm doing this. I'm doing this more so because she's a person, not because she's black, not because she's pro-black, or anything like that, or was part of the NWA. There's no political reason behind it other than she's just a human being that should be treated better than the way she has. And the facts shouldn't be misrepresented about her, and people shouldn't think things that aren't true about her. The one thing I didn't like is she showed up in Baltimore before the riots and started rooting the crowd on to chant "No justice, no peace." Now, I was in Los Angeles during the LA riots, so I know that there was rioting and fires going on in the city until that chant stopped. Not exactly something I'm a fan of, but she has the right to speak her mind as an American. And citizens, you have the right. I'm not here for political reasons, other than the more basic reason that people that just get crushed by the machinery of the media or people that are advocating certain positions, and it's more important for them to win their little cause and ruin other people's lives than actually honestly debate the issues. So make it clear, I'm completely against this whole thing of getting a bunch of people riled up with chants that were used during riots in which houses were burnt and businesses were looted. So I'm not pro that. I'm not doing that with any of that stuff in mind. that isn't something I really would think is a very good thing, and I wouldn't support, and I would speak against it. I am speaking against it. But for her as a human, just a basic human being like everybody else, and treating everybody else equally as we should, no matter whether black, white, orange, purple, whatever the fuck it is, she has the right to be treated appropriately based on what she's actually done, not what has been misunderstood about what she's done. Or she shouldn't have to listen to people call her a liar and, you know, a hate mail faker just because there's a misunderstanding about how rare the materials were that she was passing out, or how likely they were to be duplicated in hate mail. They were very likely to be duplicated in hate mail. That's what I believe. Now, I could be wrong. And if you happen to be an expert on these kinds of things, and you know there's millions of these things out there, then I have a real difficult time explaining two almost impossible coincidences. And so there you go. But I'm going to assume for the purposes of the rest of this series of videos I'm going to do here, while I read the reports, is what they say compared to what the evidence says, to see whether she's been mistreated. Okay. The root cause of this whole thing is a big fucking misunderstanding about what her materials were and how rare they were. Unfortunately, it can get to tedium. Expecting a police officer to ask her just exactly what are your materials that you pass out, and then investigating whether those are rare or not. I just happened to do that. Here we go. That's the smoking gun, or the non-smoking gun. That's the fire extinguisher, basically. All right, let's set this aside. Let's read some of these, so I can see why some of these things were happening. Now this. I'm going to tell you, this looks like a coordinated attack. I was just going to tell you this. On June 11th, this is the first article that came out. This was the most bizarre things I had ever read. And not because there's a white woman pretending to be black. Frankly, I don't find that bizarre. I just think people... there's going to be some people on this earth that choose to embrace other cultures other than their native one. I also know that through history, back in ancient Rome, white people didn't wear pants because it was considered barbarian. It's just, there's all these things that have changed over time. And this is not really shocking. A white woman is looking like a black, and I don't assume that she made the Ombudsman Committee because she was black. And there is some details in here, and then basically at the end of the day, it's not. The reason why, and that she didn't get hired, or actually... she wasn't allowed to do volunteer work as the president of the NAACP in Spokane without pay. By the way. Because they thought she was black, okay? Being on this committee is a position of power, but it was unpaid except for they reimbursed her for the cost of her trip, which she was going to use that knowledge of what excessive force was supposed to be, as I understood that, from some other thing I read, which is not... the basic documents doesn't describe what the subject of that course was too well, at least to me. So actually, we'll take that excessive force comment back. It's not really evidence-backed at this point. So, okay. So here's the first article that come out. What was bizarre about this is that... what if Rachel Dolezal is really white? Well, who gives a shit? It's none of our fucking business. I think I already covered this, actually, in my last video. But basically, why her biological parents were suddenly deciding to come out of the woodwork and say, oh, well, no, she's white. I mean, what... to me, this is a fashion choice, okay? And then we're talking about background checks. I mean, what? It's bizarre to think that a background check is going to be used to find out whether someone's really a white person or really an African-American person, as if that's needed to know. If you're going to treat someone different because of their race, then shame on you. Because you shouldn't do that. I mean, it's just flat out shouldn't happen that way. Okay? But people that picked the people for the committee did say that ethnicity was not a criterion for selection. And I have a little smart-ass remark for this thing. Basically, that they wanted diversity on the committee, but since only less than 2% of the population of Spokane is African American, if you put one person on there, they're overrepresented by 10 times. It's only a 5-person committee, so it's not. This will be violated if they pick her on a basis of being African American. The make of the commission reflects the diversity of the people, which was the mission that they had in picking their people. But it's a bizarre, this background checks. These are just buzzwords to make you think that she's getting away with something. Oh, they didn't do background checks. Well, she's getting away with something. It just leads your mind. It's a kind of language that leads your mind to think other things about what's going on besides what really the fuck going on. This asserts that the Police Oversight Committee has a significant amount of power, and it does not. That committee was absolutely powerless. They were trying to figure out what kind of letter they would write to members of the city council so that they would appoint an ombudsman for them, an interim one, and take action to do that because they weren't doing it quickly. He's the word fabricated. Now, once again, it's just a matter of, I think, fashion sense, but she did say that she was African American. Well, the deal is that she had a husband that was African American, 4 siblings that was African American. She's basically been surrounded by African American people, and even though she didn't, grow up end up having to be born in a TP or stuff like that, she didn't put that on her commission application. She may have told that to people privately. This here, where she says, our cultural memory. Look, the strangling of Eric Gardner, or the use of nooses. I'll just say, I don't know enough about the Eric Gardner case to comment. Because I don't. There's just a lot of things to know in this world. I don't know everything. That's one thing I don't know. It doesn't mean I don't give a shit. It just means I don't know. But one thing I do know is that in the past, people were killed through nooses. Specifically, African Americans. And they were targeted in a time when there were some really fucked up people walking around doing some really fucked up things that I don't approve of at all. Fucking disgusts me, and I don't want to see pictures of them. But when she talks about cultural memory, the fact that that ever happened in our country to any fucking group is a threat to us all. It's not just the threat to one group. It doesn't mean it's going to happen again to a particular group. It could happen to whites in the future. It could, anybody is, because that just precedent or something. It probably won't happen. That's a bit extreme to assume that. I guess nooses will happen, but you want to remember those kinds of things so they don't fucking happen again. Here's the thing about being born in a TP in Montana, and I have read the article. She did say that. However, when you're a fucking baby, the only place you get when you're not gonna remember whether you were born in a fucking TP or not. But when you're 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, you remember what the fuck your parents tell you, or you get a vague idea of it. And you may have misunderstood them when they said we lived in a teepee and you were born around that time. Maybe they weren't that clear about it. So she put two and two together because he did say that they lived in a fucking teepee for a while in 1974. Okay. They may not have been that specific with her before. They may have just talked about teepees. Then the next sentence about her birth, kind of like the way she's talking about her materials, you know. The truth about the materials that she in these photos are James Allen's materials. God damn, dude. I couldn't make any fucking sense of the story. I mean, what? Yeah. It's one coincidence to have the postmarks come out of the same city as Oakland, but now coincidence we have someone that just happened to go to her meeting in Spokane, just happened to go to Oakland at just the right time that she was. No. Bullshit. No one fucking. That's why they drew the conclusion they did. I can't repeat this enough. This is fucking rare. Let's see, where am I at with size here? Alright. God, I'm just ranting right away. Yeah, so anybody with, you know... There it is. There's the explanation. Not understanding that lynching photos was rare is the reason why we have 600 petition signers, of which over half of them are calling her flat out fucking liars. Or a flat out fucking liar. Fabricator of complaints. And we got people on the news, the television saying this. We thought that the hate was coming back when she was making these complaints, but well, also they were, you know, there was a local news station. I remember seeing this, but no, the hate was in Oakland and it was mailed to the area. Okay, that was the end of living. So there was a teepee involved. It's not like she just pulled this out of her ass and they never lived in a fucking teepee. There's some rational explanation for some of this. That she views race differently than other people. That she views the definition of parenthood differently than other people. That she thinks it's okay, and I think it's okay for her to dress and make our parents look like an African American. I think it's perfectly fucking fine, but most people don't. That's just a misunderstanding. It's not deception. You can't assume that because someone has looked like an African American for 10 plus years and has never wavered on that, that all of a sudden they are, you know, picking and choosing when to be white and black. Oh, when they go to Howard, she's white. Because that works for her, because she'll get a scholarship. She didn't. She was denied the scholarship. Basically, and she said, from around the time she was just about, around that time, by the time she had graduated, she had embraced an African-American lifestyle. At least, or maybe a little bit after that. But she's so fully emerged in and surrounded by people that are of African-American heritage, that she is one of them. She is, you know, so she says she's African-American. That's why she does that. It's a very loose, it's not biographical. It's not a DNA thing. You know, if DNA was tied to culture, listen to this. If DNA was tied to culture, I'd be wearing a fucking toga. Right? We'd all be wearing fucking togas, or whatever the Germans wore in the north there, you know, lambskin or some shit, you know, I don't know what the fuck they wore back in the ancient days, right? But culture is not tied to DNA, okay? There's no link between DNA and culture. Culture is something that you're influenced by based on who you live with, who you're surrounded by, and who you know, and how you interact with people and what you need to do to survive, to interact with people, or what you need to do to not be completely fucking isolated, ignored by people. That's it. That's all there is to it. Okay, so she's living with African American people. She's surrounded by she's going to start behaving by them and want to look like them and fit in with them. It's a natural thing a human being would do. She didn't do that to get an unpaid position at the NAACP. She didn't do that. I don't think so. Or an unpaid position in the Ombudsman Committee that only did so much as to reimburse her for a 2-day trip to Oakland at $300. And certainly didn't do that to get her job at Eastern Washington University, because she's an educated woman with a degree from Howard in the study which she's teaching. Now, I may disagree with everything that she teaches. I may not even be able to stand to attend one of her classes, but you know what? This is fucking America. And she ought to be able to teach what she wants. She has the right. It's her right to speak. And if you have a disagreement with what she has to say, be honest and just debate with her on that, instead of trying to figure out and find a, well, I wouldn't say this is fine. This is definitely a misunderstanding here, but I mean, they really look for every little thing. You know, we got confidential police reports that are hardly redacted available on the her goddamn birth certificate. Why is this public? It's available on the fucking internet. We have pages and pages of people. Okay, so I haven't gotten to all this stuff. But you got the story. I mean, everybody's heard the story of what these things are. There were some reports that were filed when she was up north. So you can't say that she lied about the previous hate that she had received on her Ombudsman Committee application. Okay, that comes from the Coeur d'Alene Press, which I frankly feel is hostile towards her. She didn't have to hunt her own food. Never have to live in Africa or Colorado. No, that doesn't make her a bitter black. Oh, you lived in Colorado, or you had to hunt your own food, or you're in South Africa before? Well, you're a bitter black. It doesn't. Those could be just completely a misstatement of facts. A misunderstanding on her part, or misspeaking, or maybe the person interviewed her made some mistakes when they took their notes. We don't know. That's hardly... Right now, what I've got it down to is she's a white person that's decided to dress as a black, so I think that there's just a lot of white people that don't like that. I don't care. She has the right to do that. We have misstatements about her early childhood. And then we got this weird stuff going on. This is the spokesman. A former board member of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations said that he was recently approached by other board members urging them to come forward with concerns. So basically there were board members that were trying to figure out if they can get something on her. And when these people were asked, they denied it. I don't see why this individual would make that shit up. Okay. Here's another misleading headline. They think they've caught her in another lie. The main thing is that the police they put too much weight on the Postal Service, saying that the Postal Service is basically what the Postal Service told them is, never will it ever be that a single letter will come out of this post office that's missing a cancellation and a barcode. Never gonna happen. It would never happen. No, I swear by, they took their word on that. I'm not willing to do that. And the second thing is they couldn't reconcile her materials showing up in Oakland. I mean, that is the big fucking deal. Okay. Again, her materials are really James Allen's materials, which is a rare collection of materials that anybody that is sending hate mail to a person of color is probably, if they're an asshole, which a hate mail letter creator would be an asshole, I would assume. In fact, it's not even an assumption, it's a fact. He's going to look for lynching photographs, and they're no doubt going to end up being the same fucking lynching photographs that she was presenting in her presentation. So, what's the problem here? Then this is, God, it says, oh, well, the second letter from the War Pigs, this is the big red flag here. The first piece of news that came out basically contained the implication that Rachel Dolezal didn't at all, that she had just, it was said, perhaps she had made this hate letter herself and put it in the P.O. box herself. Because there was the words used, well, if they only if they had their own key could they do that. And that is in here by the inspector. I probably should have highlighted that. We always look at that. No, they don't always look at it. When they can, they look at it. But they don't. I'm sorry. The letter volume, they can't look at them all. Let's get to this. I know it's in here. Here. Yeah, hers. The only way, this is where they get this shit. The only way that this letter could have ended up in the P.O. box was placed there by someone with the key to that box, or if a USPS employee was involved. He interviewed the other USPS employee. Basically, they deny what we all know happens, and that is that stamps go through the system, letters go through the system, and sometimes, on a very rare occasion, they're not fucking canceled. And he denies that, and he suggests here that Andy, unknown last name, the only way that the letter could have ended up in this box is if it was placed with someone with a key to that box. And what does that turn into? It turns into pages and pages of highlighted, just nasty remarks about how dishonest Rachel Dolezal is, and all this other stuff. And their life just fucking falls apart because because of something else going on in her life, I think, with the lawsuit. Where it says here there are no direct threats against her, then we see the picture of the lynchings and the man holding up the gun. It's insane. And then she gets on national TV, and what happens? We have someone ask her flat out, how long have you been deceiving people? When did you start deceiving people? I mean, for fuck's sake. It's totally fucking out of line. She said in her application that she was American Indian, white, and African American. She doesn't have any African American blood in her, but she has blood relations to her, or I guess by adoption. You've been through so many adoptions in your life, you start to think about things a little bit more fluidly. But anyway, she has family members that are African American. To not say that she has anything to do with African American is dishonest also. I'm just, that's my bias on that one. Call me biased on that, but that's what I think it is. Here's Daniel Dolezal, who actually is friendly towards her. He praises her. That's good. Now this, it's not nice for her to say things like that over a fan, but then again, these aren't public announcements. When it comes to public announcements, just lay off. I don't know. So I'm getting worn out here. Here's some of the, here's another hate article. Basically, here receipts amounted to $320, and it was definitely in line with the business that she was $374. Definitely in line with the business that she was in, or the purpose she was in, to get information for this ombudsman committee, and so she would know what excessive force was. At least I've read that somewhere. I keep saying it, but I don't really have exact backup for that. Here, this is just absolutely misleading. Dolezal visited the city. The hate mail is okay, she was there. Everybody thinks that she's deceptive, so they just assume that she made the letters herself. This was the smoking gun, the proof. This came out simultaneously with them asking her to resign over the commission. And to make a long story short on that, because I'm just getting freaking worn out, is that as far as I could tell, just from a humanistic and a neutral standpoint, they were understaffed. Now, I don't know how they became understaffed, and maybe she was too much of a busybody. That does happen. It has nothing to do with whether she's black or trying to be black, or it doesn't. There's nothing, no reflection on whether she's honest or dishonest. It just, maybe she's just too much of a busybody and started to annoy the staffer to the extent she couldn't stand to stay. And okay, that happens sometimes, and it doesn't necessarily happen always the bad people, and certainly she isn't deserving of the comments that are made here. And someone that doesn't really pay attention to the story might think that, well, be careful if you cross the race line and try to join another race, because you'll have to resign and you'll get kicked out of government. Is that supposed to be the lesson we're supposed to learn? Watch out, don't identify with any other culture but your own, otherwise lest you be called dishonest. And that's just a bad precedent to set. I may follow up on this sometime next week, but I'm exhausted. But I think I've done a pretty good job. So the smoking gun, once again, review here is that the materials that she called hers that mysteriously appeared inside the first hate letter that was sent to her happened to be something that would be expected to be included in a hate letter. And those items happened to be rare items that coincidentally matched what she was passing out already. And it's hardly a coincidence. It's more or less both individuals had very good reason to use the same materials and what their purposes were. The purpose of the hate mail sender was to intimidate, and the purpose of her was to educate. But there was only one small set of items by which the illustration could be made in either case, and those turned out to be the same ones. And so in her panic that someone might be close by and messing with her, coupled with the fact that her son seems to have picked up on her fear and seems to now make reports that aren't really true, so to speak, that everything turned out to be the perfect storm for her, and along with the stress that was going on with her own, with the lawsuit that's going on that I have not looked into and I don't want to talk about, because it's not about how she's being treated as a person, just as a person that should have rights and should be treated fairly. This was a misunderstanding about the rarity of her materials, really it's James Allen's materials, and that's my opinion of what happened.